I gave my son everything, my youth, my sacrifices, my love. But the day I retired, he threw me out like I was trash. He believed I had nothing left, that I was just a burden to be discarded. What he didn't know was that the house he lived in, the money he flaunted, and the future he dreamed of all rested in my hands. Greed blinded him, pride made him cruel, and envy drove his wife to push me away. Little did they know the fortune I had hidden would destroy the very illusion they built their lives upon. I never thought that stepping into retirement would feel like stepping off a cliff. For 40 years, I taught children how to read, how to write, how to believe in themselves. My name is Eleanor Grant, and when I left my classroom for the last time, I believed I was walking into the gentlest years of my life. I had imagined mornings with hot tea, afternoons tending flowers, evenings filled with the laughter of my son's family. It was supposed to be peaceful. It was supposed to be home. Michael, my only son, was my pride and proof that all my sacrifices had meant something. At 38, he carried himself like the businessman he had always dreamed of becoming. When I looked at him, I saw the little boy I had walked to school on rainy mornings, the boy who clung to my hand when life felt uncertain. To the outside world, he was successful, respected, and perhaps even enviable. To me, he was still the center of my world. Beside him stood Clara, his wife, with her polished smiles and soft words. At 35, she presented herself as the perfect daughter-in-law, always polite, always attentive. She would call me Mom and compliment my cooking, though her eyes never quite matched her voice. Still, I wanted to believe her kindness was genuine. I wanted to think she embraced me as part of her family. And then there was Noah, 10 years old with a face so full of light it made the shadows of the world retreat for a moment. He would run into my arms after school, chatter about his day, and curl beside me with his favorite books. With him, there was no pretension, no hidden agenda. He loved me as I was, and that love anchored me when I felt adrift. We lived in a quiet town where people knew each other's names and greeted one another at the grocery store. I had been part of that community for decades. I was the teacher who stayed after class for struggling students, the neighbor who baked extra pies for church gatherings, the friend who would never turn away someone in need. People respected me, even admired me, but I never considered myself special. I was just Eleanor, someone who gave her best to her family and her students. Retirement, I thought, would be a well-earned rest. I pictured myself teaching Noah the art of patience in gardening, sharing recipes with Clara, or perhaps simply enjoying evenings when Michael would tell me about his work while I sat back, proud of the man he had become. Those were the images I carried with me when I packed the last of my papers from my classroom. But in quiet moments, memories of the past crept in, nights when I stayed awake grading homework by lamplight while Michael slept soundly in the next room. The years I skipped new clothes so he could have football cleats, or the holidays I worked extra hours so he could attend the college he dreamed of. I told myself it had all been worth it, that one day he would understand the weight of those sacrifices. My heart whispered that he already did. On my first week of retirement, Michael said to me, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone. Our house is big enough for all of us. Come live with us. You'll never feel lonely again." His words wrapped around me like a promise. I imagined warmth, unity, the comfort of being close to family. I thought it was love. So I moved into their home, carrying only a few bags and a heart full of gratitude. At first, everything seemed fine. Clara smiled as she showed me the guest room. Michael assured me I was free to relax, that I had nothing to worry about. And Noah was overjoyed, hugging me tightly as if I had given him the greatest gift just by being there. But then, small things began to surface. Clara's smile tightened when I offered to help with dinner. "You've worked all your life, Mom. You should rest," she said, though her tone hinted at something sharper. Michael seemed distracted when I spoke, his responses growing shorter, as if he no longer had time for my stories. And Clara soon began introducing little rules. Don't enter the kitchen after 8. Don't rearrange the pantry. Don't teach Noah the old ways of discipline or chores. I brushed these things aside at first, telling myself it was just adjustment. After all, every household has its rhythm, and I didn't want to disrupt theirs. But the feeling of being a guest, no, worse, a tenant, began to gnaw at me. This wasn't the warmth of family I had imagined. It was something else, something unspoken but undeniable. Noah, in his innocent way, revealed what I hadn't wanted to believe. One evening, as we read together, he said, "Mom and Dad keep saying you're taking up too much space, but I like having you here." His words were simple, but they cut deep. I forced a smile for him, though inside I felt a chill. I had trusted that my golden years would be filled with dignity and belonging. I had trusted that my son's invitation was born of love. I had trusted too much. I believed my retirement would be the beginning of peace, but I had no idea that within days, everything I thought I knew about family would begin to unravel. The day I retired should have been filled with joy. I had spent weeks imagining a small celebration, maybe balloons from Noah, perhaps a cake with my name in bright letters, or even just dinner with my family where I could finally feel appreciated. I walked into Michael's home that evening with my certificate of retirement in my hand, my heart swelling with expectation, but instead of laughter, I was met with silence. Michael sat stiffly at the dining table, Clara beside him, her lips pressed into a thin line. Noah had been sent to his room early, though I didn't know why. The atmosphere was heavy, suffocating, and in that silence I felt the first tremor of dread. Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk." The words were so formal they chilled me. I waited, clutching my retirement certificate like a shield. Clara leaned forward, her voice calm but cold. "We think it's time you consider living somewhere else. This house, it's becoming too crowded. We need more space for our family." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. "You want me to leave?" My voice cracked like old wood. Michael avoided my eyes. "It's not that we don't appreciate you, but Clara and I feel that for everyone's comfort, it would be best. There are facilities, nice ones, where you'd have your own space. You wouldn't feel like a burden." The word sliced through me. Burden. Clara's eyes glimmered as she added, "There's a wonderful retirement home not far from here. They have activities, nurses, friends your age. It's really the best option." I froze, my hands trembling as I gripped the certificate tighter, as if holding on to proof that I was still someone, still worthy of respect. I had just given the last of my working years to the world, and in return, my own son was asking me to step aside. "I thought," I whispered, but the words collapsed in my throat. "I thought you wanted me. I thought you loved me. I thought I belonged here." Michael's expression was tense, as if he'd rehearsed this moment. Clara's gaze held no hesitation, and in that instant the home I had walked into so hopefully became a stranger's house. I retreated to my room in silence, my heart pounding with disbelief. I had spent decades sacrificing for Michael's future, and now he was discarding me like a piece of old furniture. That night, I packed a suitcase, each fold of fabric pulling memories from the past. The nights I skipped dinner so Michael could eat. The winters I wore the same coat so he could have new shoes. The mornings I worked double shifts to pay for his college tuition. Every memory weighed heavier than the suitcase itself. Tears blurred my vision, but anger flickered beneath them. How quickly love could be repaid with convenience. How easily sacrifice could be forgotten when it no longer served their needs. The next morning, as I zipped the last pocket of my bag, Noah slipped into the room. His small face was clouded with confusion. "Grandma, why are you packing? Did you do something wrong?" I knelt down, pulling him close. His innocence pierced me deeper than Clara's words. "No, sweetheart, I didn't do anything wrong." He hesitated, then whispered, "But Mom and Dad said you're taking up too much space. I don't think that's true. I want you here." His little arms wrapped around my neck, and I held on as if he were the only piece of love I had left. After he left, I sat on the bed staring at the half-empty room. The walls, once filled with Noah's laughter and Clara's polished words, now pressed in around me like a cage. My chest ached, my breath shallow. Disbelief turned to sorrow, sorrow to anger, anger to something sharper, resolve. I would not beg to stay where I wasn't wanted. I would not let their greed and pride define my worth. But in that moment, I allowed myself to feel it all. The betrayal, the humiliation, the aching grief of being discarded by the very person I had given everything to. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of their life continuing without me. I had believed I was part of this home. Now I knew I was only tolerated until I became inconvenient. Still, one truth settled quietly in my chest. They thought I had nothing. They believed I was powerless, dependent, just another aging woman with nowhere to go. They were wrong. They had no idea who I truly was, nor the strength I had left, nor the secrets I carried. And one day soon, they would learn the cost of mistaking me for a burden. When I left Michael's house with my suitcase, I didn't go to a shelter, nor did I wander aimlessly. I had somewhere to go, somewhere no one knew about. 20 years ago, on a teacher's modest salary, I had managed to buy a small apartment in town. It was simple, tucked away in a quiet building, and I never told Michael about it. At the time, I only thought of it as a backup, a little insurance if life ever cornered me. My late husband had always told me, "Eleanor, always keep a way out. You never know when you'll need it." His words echoed in my ears as I slid the old key into the lock. The apartment smelled of dust and memories. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and sat down, the silence swallowing me whole. For the first time in days, I felt safe. No judgment, no disdain, no watchful eyes measuring my every move, just me and the hum of the refrigerator. I pulled open the drawers of an old cabinet, rifling through yellowed papers. That's when I found them. Envelopes filled with bank statements, folders marked with investments, a thick packet of documents bearing my name. I hadn't looked at them in years. As I flipped through the papers, my breath caught. The accounts weren't small. They had grown. Savings, stocks, even bonds. And then, my eyes froze on one deed. The house Michael and Clara lived in. The house they treated as theirs. It wasn't. It was mine. My name was on the deed, clear as day. They had built their entire sense of ownership, their entire pride, on a foundation that was never theirs. For a moment, I sat motionless, clutching the papers, torn between fury and relief. Fury that they had dared to throw me out of a home that still belonged to me. Relief that, after all these years, I hadn't given everything away. My husband's words returned again like a whisper of wisdom. Always keep a way out. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling, my heart aching yet strangely steady. The humiliation I had endured just days ago began to shift into something else, a quiet strength. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't dependent. They had built their arrogance on a lie, and that lie was about to collapse. I whispered to myself, "They've trapped themselves." The weight of those words sank deep. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was irony. But I knew I couldn't face them with only fragments of memory and dusty papers. I needed certainty. I needed clarity. So the next morning, I called Harold, an old friend and lawyer I trusted with my life. Harold met me at a cafe, his hair whiter, his eyes still sharp. I laid the documents before him, my hands trembling slightly. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the papers slowly. Then he looked at me and said, "Eleanor, do you realize what you have here?" I shook my head. I just thought it was savings, a backup. I never really kept track. Harold chuckled, though his voice carried astonishment. "Backup? Eleanor, this is more than a backup. These accounts, these investments, you're sitting on a fortune. Do you remember David, your late husband's colleague? He must have guided these investments well. They've grown beyond anything you likely imagined." The room tilted slightly around me. A fortune. While Michael and Clara thought I was penniless, while they schemed to push me into a nursing home, I had been holding wealth they couldn't begin to grasp, and as if fate wanted to confirm everything, Harold leaned in. Also, this house deed, Michael's home, it's in your name. He doesn't own it. He never has. I pressed my fingers to my lips, emotions flooding through me. Shock, vindication, sorrow. The house he had thrown me out of wasn't even his to command. That night, I returned to the apartment with a fire burning in my chest. I replayed Clara's condescending words, Michael's silence, Noah's innocent confusion, and then I recalled something one of my neighbors had once mentioned casually. Clara asking questions about me. How much did Eleanor have? Did she save anything? Could she really afford to live alone? The pieces began to fit together. Clara hadn't just been polite for appearances. She had been calculating, testing the waters, measuring what she thought she could take. Michael, blinded by greed and manipulated by pride, had gone along with it. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the stack of documents, now organized neatly in a folder. This wasn't just evidence of security. This was power. They thought they had pushed me aside, erased me from the picture. But the truth was, they were the ones standing on borrowed ground. For a long moment, I let myself breathe, let myself feel both the ache of betrayal and the thrill of discovery. The line between sorrow and strength blurred until they became one. And as the clock ticked in the silence, I realized something else. This was only the beginning. The secrets I held, the truths I was uncovering. What I had found so far was just the first layer. The deeper I dug, the more I would reveal. And when the time came, I would not simply survive their betrayal. I would show them what it meant to underestimate me. I whispered to the empty room, "This is only the start." It was Noah, innocent as ever, who revealed the next piece of the puzzle without even realizing it. He came to visit me at the small apartment one afternoon, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his eyes full of worry. As he settled into the chair across from me, he blurted out, "Grandma, why does Mom keep saying that when you die they'll sell the house? She says it like it's already theirs." My breath caught, and I felt the air thicken in the room. "She said that?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as possible. He nodded quickly. "Yeah, I heard them last night. They said once you're gone, they'll finally have enough money to travel, to buy a bigger house." Dad didn't even argue. He just agreed. The words cut deeper than a knife. It wasn't just that they wanted me gone. They had already planned my absence, counted my life in dollar signs. The child I had raised with love was treating my future like an obstacle in his path. That night, unable to sleep, I replayed Noah's words again and again. My chest ached with betrayal, but there was more. In the quiet, I remembered something else I had overheard weeks earlier. Clara's hushed phone calls, her voice sharp but restrained. At the time, I had dismissed it as business. Now I wasn't so sure. The next day, Harold confirmed my worst suspicion. "Eleanor," he said gravely. "Clara consulted another lawyer a few months ago. She was trying to find out how to get you to sign the deed of the house over to Michael. When she couldn't find a legal way to force it, she began asking about power of attorney, retirement transfers. She was looking for loopholes." I sank into my chair, my hands gripping the armrests. Clara had played her role so well, the polite daughter-in-law, the soft-spoken hostess, and yet behind that veneer, she'd been calculating, plotting, preparing to strip me of everything. For hours after Harold left, I sat alone in the dim light of the apartment. Tears streamed down my cheeks, hot and bitter. I wept for the years I had believed her smile, for the son who had followed her lead, for the cruel irony of being discarded while they lusted after wealth that wasn't theirs. But then I stopped. I wiped my face, stared at myself in the mirror, and something hardened inside me. I would not let them win by breaking me. Yes, I had been naive, but I was not weak. I was still here, and I had power they had no idea how to reckon with. I'll let them dig their own grave, I whispered to the empty room. From that moment forward, I began to plan. Harold and I met again, this time with determination in both our eyes. We need to protect your legacy, he said, spreading out documents across his desk. Michael and Clara can't touch any of this unless you give it to them. Then I won't, I replied firmly. Everything goes to Noah, and a portion to a charity for children who don't have what he has. Together, we drafted a new will, airtight and undeniable. It was more than just legal paperwork. It was justice. It was my way of reclaiming the dignity they had tried to strip from me. But I didn't stop there. I gathered every bank statement, every deed, every piece of evidence that proved the truth. I placed them into a thick envelope sealed and marked with my signature, and then I decided how it would all unfold. I would call for a family dinner, just a simple evening that seemed harmless. Michael and Clara would think it was an olive branch, that I was crawling back, desperate to be part of their lives again. They wouldn't see what was coming. And to ensure that their reaction couldn't be twisted or denied, I invited someone else. Mrs. Whitman, my neighbor from years past, the woman who had seen me raise Michael from a boy into a man. She would stand as a living reminder of who I was, what I had done, and how low they had sunk. I imagined the table, Clara's smug smile, Michael's forced politeness, Noah's innocent chatter. I would sit there quietly, listening, waiting. Then, when the moment was right, I would place the envelope on the table and let the truth bleed out one page at a time. For the first time since the day I retired, I felt something shift inside me. Not just pain, but anticipation. They thought they had erased me. They thought they had reduced me to nothing. But soon, they would realize that everything they stood on, everything they claimed, was mine. I closed the folder with a snap and whispered, "I'm ready." The night of the dinner came cloaked in an ordinary calm. Michael and Clara greeted me with strained smiles, clearly expecting reconciliation. Their eyes carried the quiet arrogance of people who believed they had already won. To them, I was still the discarded mother, desperate to crawl back into their good graces. We sat around the dining table, Noah cheerful as always, unaware of the storm about to break. Clara poured wine, her polished voice filling the silence. "It's good to have you here tonight, Mom. You've had time to settle into your apartment, yes? Perhaps it's best for you. Still, you might want to think about more permanent arrangements. A retirement home would take care of everything for you." Her words were honey wrapped around venom. Michael nodded, his fork clinking against his plate. I listened, calm, waiting for the moment. I reached into my bag and placed a thick envelope onto the table. The sound of it landing against the wood silenced the room. Michael's eyes flickered with curiosity, Clara's with suspicion. "What's that?" she asked, her voice tightening. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I slid the envelope across the table and began pulling out the papers one by one. "This," I said steadily, "is the deed to the house you live in. Notice the name on it. Mine, not yours." Michael's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Clara leaned forward, scanning the paper, her face paling. I pulled out another folder. "These are my savings accounts. And these," I continued, laying out the next set of documents, "are investments, stocks and bonds that have grown over decades. This is the truth you chose not to see." The room seemed to shrink. Clara's carefully constructed composure cracked as she whispered, "That can't be right. The house." Michael said, "The house has never been yours," I interrupted, my voice calm but unyielding. "You've lived on borrowed ground all this time." Michael finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" I met his eyes, feeling the years of sacrifice and silence pressing between us. "Because I didn't think I needed to. I thought love mattered more than money. I thought you would never see me as a burden." The papers lay between us like a mirror, reflecting their greed back at them. And for the first time, I saw them speechless. Their reactions came in waves. Clara's face contorted, tears slipping down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of a plan unraveling. "We could have had everything," she muttered. "Everything." Michael sat frozen, shame painted across his features, though his pride held him in silence. I drew a deep breath. "I am not poor. I am not powerless. I was only poor in your eyes because you chose not to see me for who I am." At that moment, Harold stepped into the room, my lawyer, carrying another sealed document. His presence made Clara flinch. He opened the folder and laid it on the table. "This is Eleanor's updated will," he announced firmly, "effective immediately. The assets are no longer tied to Michael or Clara. The primary beneficiary is her grandson, Noah, along with charitable organizations she supports." The words landed like thunder. Clara gasped. Michael's face flushed red. "You can't," he began, but Harold cut him off. "She can, and she has." The silence that followed was broken only by Noah's soft voice. He looked at me with wide eyes and whispered, "I'm glad you'll never leave me, Grandma." His innocence, his pure loyalty, cut through the chaos like light through darkness. For me, it was both a wound and a balm. In his words, I found comfort, but for Michael, it was a mirror showing what he had lost. He hadn't only lost my trust or the wealth he craved, he had lost the love of his own son. The room fractured under the weight of truth. Clara turned away, her tears streaking mascara down her cheeks. Michael clenched his fists, trapped between anger and humiliation. I gathered the documents calmly, sliding them back into the envelope. My voice was quiet, but each word carried the strength of decades. This was never about money. It was about respect, about love, about family, and you failed me in every way. I rose from the table, leaving behind a silence heavier than any shout. But as I stepped away, I knew the revelation wasn't finished. There was still one truth left, the one that would cut the deepest. And when I revealed it, they would understand the full cost of what their greed had done. Months passed, and with them came a new rhythm to my life. In my small apartment, I found a freedom I hadn't known in years. No rules about when I could enter the kitchen, no eyes watching me as if I were an intruder. I cooked when I wanted, played music as loud as I pleased, and filled the rooms with the laughter of friends from my community club. I joined a group of retirees who met weekly, and together we painted, played cards, and danced to songs that reminded us of youth. For the first time since my husband's death, I felt alive. My days were no longer defined by Michael and Clara's disapproval. Instead, they were colored by new friendships, small adventures, and the joy of reclaiming myself. When I walked through town, neighbors smiled warmly. They had heard whispers of what happened, how Michael had cast me out, how Clara had schemed. People were not kind to them. Respect, once lightly given, had turned to disdain. Michael's business suffered. Clara, stripped of her carefully polished image, shrank under the weight of gossip. Debt closed in on them. The life they thought would flourish, crumbling piece by piece. The very neighbors who once admired their success now spoke in hushed tones of their arrogance. And every time I heard their names, I felt no triumph, only a quiet certainty. Greed always destroys from within. Noah continued to visit me, bringing with him the warmth of a bond that had never wavered. We spent afternoons reading in the park, evenings baking cookies in my kitchen, and mornings talking about his dreams. He once told me, "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Strong, but kind." Those words carried more weight than any fortune I owned. He was my hope, my legacy, and proof that love could survive even the deepest fractures. One evening, sitting by my window with a cup of tea, I let myself reflect. I thought of the years I had given, the love I had poured out, and the betrayal that nearly broke me. But I also thought of the strength I had uncovered, the peace I had rebuilt. Life, I realized, had not ended with their rejection. It had begun anew. I smiled, whispering into the quiet, "This is what it feels like to live for myself." Yet even then, I knew my story wasn't finished, because stories like mine aren't just about survival, they're about passing on a truth that others need to hear. And my truth was clear. Love without respect is hollow, and family without gratitude is doomed to crumble. I remembered that night when I stood at their dinner table, laying out the documents that shattered their illusions. I remembered Noah's voice, soft but steady. "I'm glad you'll never leave me, Grandma." It echoed still, reminding me that while Michael had lost me, Noah had gained more of me than ever before. Looking back, the lesson stood sharp as glass. Greed had devoured the bond between parent and child. Pride had blinded Michael to the truth of who I was. Envy had driven Clara to betrayal. But love, the love of a 10-year-old boy, had saved me. If I could speak directly to those who watched my story unfold, I would ask, are you certain you are honoring your parents, or are you slowly turning them into burdens? Do you measure their worth by convenience or by the sacrifices they made for you? Because I now know the truth. Money can be taken, houses can be lost, reputations can be broken, but the bond of respect and gratitude is what sustains a family. Without it, even the wealthiest home will turn hollow. One late afternoon, Noah and I walked through the park hand in hand. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. He looked up at me and smiled, a smile so pure it made the world feel lighter. And in that moment, everything felt whole again. I had been cast aside, but I found strength. I had been betrayed, but I reclaimed my dignity. I had been silenced, but I found my voice. And as the last rays of sunlight touched my face, I knew that while their story was written in greed, mine was written in resilience. The lesson was simple, but it burned deep. Gratitude binds us. Greed destroys us. And I would carry that truth into every sunset left in my life.